All right, we're going to talk about engaging social media and some ways not to engage with social media, some boundaries, and also some ways to maximize your efforts with social media. If you're like me, you don't have a lot of time, and so being able to choose what social media platforms you're on, how you're engaging with them, and then just establishing some perimeters as to it relates to how to really safeguard yourself, because some of the things, honestly, we do with a lot of conversations around the nation with lawsuits when it comes to social media, and unfortunately, some of our own ministers are really finding themselves getting in trouble because of some things that they basically just didn't prepare themselves best when it comes to social media. It's the digital age. We're heading into 2018 here. If we're watching this video, probably 2018, and it's like, what are you doing when it comes to communicating today? And most likely, the most effective means for communicating with your students, it's going to talk about social media. And so, whether that's through Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Facebook, you're still on MySpace, you're probably not reaching a ton of students, but there's a lot of different platforms, and there's ones that come and go, and so constantly you're in this idea of trying to figure out what social media platforms am I going to engage with, what types of platforms I'm going to engage with. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit today. This isn't as much about some of the strategies when it comes to social media. I may get into a couple of those things, but it really comes down to the philosophy of how you're going to utilize and engage with social media. And so I hope you can learn a few things as it relates to best practices, and maybe just creating some safeguards for yourself to make sure you're as effective as possible, and also just protecting yourself when it comes to your personal life and in ministry as well. And so a couple things to understand with social media is, number one, you have to understand what it's not. Social media is not a toy, and it's not a weapon. A toy can be taken too lightly, and you could just use it for playful means, and it just becomes something that you handle the wrong way, and you can get yourself in real trouble by treating it like a toy, because it's a medium, it's a communication platform that can't be treated just like a toy, just to be able to say whatever you wish to say on it and just throwing it all out there. It's also not a weapon. It's not a means for attacks, and sometimes people are a little bit more bold on social media. There's communication theories regarding this, a lot of study that's been put into it. People are much more bold when it comes to how they portray themselves digitally or through communication means with social media than it would be even in reality, in real lives. And so this obviously translates a lot with students in cyberbullying and just some things that are out there, and some people can really say some harmful things and hurtful things that they regret later. And so you got to understand what it's not. It's not a toy, it's not a weapon, but it's a tool. Social media is a tool, and it can be used well. You don't have to completely abandon it. You don't have to try to do ministry outside of it, but I feel like you can really engage with it. And so that's what I'm going to talk about. Just a couple things to understand is this may not be under the umbrella of social media, but text messaging. I'm going to just include a little bit into the talk of it because it's a way students still communicate. And so I may kind of sum that into a little bit of the things when it comes to messaging in general, when it comes to just communicating with students and your leaders. A couple of ways your students have to understand social media is they understand it as an everyday communication means. It's the digital age, not just saying that, it truly is. Sometimes students and us, sometimes we have a difficulty separating what is digital and what is real. And in many ways, what is digital is real, and we separate it so often sometimes that we kind of, this can really get us into trouble. We look at some things that we would never do in reality, but we let it slip or let it slide sometimes when it relates to the practice of social media. And being really specific with this, I will talk about the kinds of communication. So I'm going to talk about boundaries when it comes to social media and establishing safeguards for you in reality, we would never have a closed door conversation with a single student. Hopefully, you know this is assumed, that you wouldn't put yourself in a situation where it's another student's word against yours. You just don't do it. You know that you're not going to put yourself in a situation where you're driving a student home alone in a car. You're not going to be alone ever with another student. You want to always put yourself in a situation where there's a witness, there's someone who's going to keep you accountable, someone who's going to be able to vouch for you and be able to, you just never know. And again, you could have the best assumption of the student would never say something wrong or nothing would ever come up like that. But just to put yourself in the best position, you want to make sure to allow yourself public means of communication. And so when it comes to social media, sometimes though, we would treat this differently somehow and saying, okay, let's have I wouldn't have a closed door conversation with a student in my office, but I would have a one-on-one text message with a student, or I would have a private message through Twitter or Instagram, and that's okay with a student. And I know that may seem like, trivial, and you're like, oh, well, you're just being a little too harsh on those things. But honestly, we've seen enough lawsuits and seen enough difficulty and trouble where people don't have open access to conversations. Again, it's the other student's word against theirs. I know you could say, well, there's a track record of it. There's a message being traced. I could see how the thread goes, but at any point, you may feel like you have the best read on a conversation, saying, I know I can take control of this situation. I know where the conversation is going. And so I can manage this. Never feel like you're the exception, because the moment you feel like you're the exception, honestly, you're probably oblivious to the situation itself, and that situation can very easily take control of you. And so to protect yourself, to protect the student, to protect the ministry, I would encourage you to never have a private conversation with students. And ask yourself a question of, why is this a private conversation? Does it have to be a private conversation? And what's stopping me from including someone else in this conversation? And so it may be that you have a message going on in a group message, and that could be a healthy conversation, is just invite someone else into it. Let it be another leader as well in there, or open up the door for others to allow access into your account. I do this with my wife, and I have her access to my passwords to different things, to where it's just this thing where I know that she has access into any conversation that I have through whatever it may be. And so you may have a trusted friend. I've had this where a mentor of mine, a youth pastor of mine, when I was interning, gave me access to his account information, and I would just help him sift through the communication and see what was the most important conversations that he needed to respond to. But it was an accountability thing of, one, I got to learn how to have those common conversations because I got to see up close from a personal account from my leader, and also it was something where my leader was able to have that accountability of someone else kind of being eyes and having that safeguard as well. And so I want you to think about it in that way. I know you may not always think of it in the way of separating, reality of, physical and what is digital, but we've got to be able to include it the same, because to these students in their world, in their context, it is the same. Another thing to just think about as well with boundaries would be time management. It's easy to get sucked into the social media, and you're looking through, scrolling through your feed, and one video to the next, and somehow you're watching cats on YouTube, and you're like, I don't even know how I got here. What am I doing? And so time management is really important, just to be able to make sure that when you're going in on something. I think they say the average time it takes for someone to look at their phone, usually they get sucked in for at least 10 minutes, and that's usually the case. You can't just look at it, and just be like, oh, I'm just going to check my phone. You get drawn. Apps are created to gear you towards your time and sucking that out of you. And so be intentional with that as well. I would say look at yourself and having a day where you just shut your phone off. Keep your Sabbath. Have a time where it's just family or it's just the personal time. Just shut your phone off. You don't need to respond to the text message right away. It can wait till tomorrow. You don't have to respond to the message. It's not urgent. They may want you now, but they don't need you right now. And so being able to have that safeguard as well. I would say your time. I'd say set a curfew and encourage your leaders as well. Set a curfew. Try to convince me that there's a conversation where past midnight, it's a beneficial conversation with someone. If it's not an emergency, I know sometimes it feels like it's an emergency. You get this Messiah syndrome where you feel like you're going to save the world. If you're not up past midnight and you're not the one responding to that text, you need to save the life. You need to do those things. And I know that there are crazy exceptions and things can take place, but honestly, if that's an ongoing issue, if there's something that's not a healthy issue, you need to get help, and you need to make sure that you safeguard yourself to set a curfew for yourself where you're going to just shut your phone off for the night. You're not going to respond to text. If you have a text from a student, text from a leader, you're not establishing a healthy trend if they think you're just going to be available, past 11 or midnight, and they can just get a hold of you that way. You want to be accessible, but you also want to establish some leadership patterns as well, where you're helping to model for them a healthy lifestyle. And so hopefully I can release you of that burden that you feel you need to always be 24/7 for people, because you really don't. And just a couple best practices. I'll kind of finish with these things. So what can you do? There's some boundaries you can create, but how can you be intentional in making the most of your social media? I'd say the number one thing to do is be present. You don't want just an account just to have an account. If you still have a Facebook account or a Twitter account and it's a dead account, like it's just, you haven't posted for a year, you haven't posted for 6 months. Honestly, I would just ask yourself, is it worth really having it? Maybe you're saving the username or something for maybe MySpace resurrects sometime. I don't know, but it's this idea of being present in ministry is one of the number one things. If you're going to have the account, then utilize the account. Don't just let it be ghostly, let it be there, because it's this idea of almost, to students, it's relating them to, it's kind of the idea of a ghost follower. If you're following someone and you're never present or active in their posts, or you're not engaging with their social media, then it's just like you're ignoring them. That's how it's communicated sometimes, and you may not intend that or feel that, but by just having an account and scrolling through, or not logging in, not ever using it, it communicates to others that you're not active, you're not present. And so just be present. If you're going to have an account, then utilize the account. If you're going to be not active on the accounts, just go ahead and delete them, or just post on there saying, hey, this is not an active account, and you're saving it for hopefully MySpace 2020. The next thing would be kind. If you're going to have an account, be present, but also be kind. Ask yourselves, that question of, am I going to be able to contribute to other people? And, just liking a post, maybe you wonder, man, why don't my students like my posts? They never like anything that I say. Try considering liking their posts. Like the ones that are you'd like to see modeled, and maybe every other one is not something that you'd want represented, but maybe the ones that, man, they're almost there, they're getting there. Just go ahead and just affirm them in the things they do right. Catch them doing things right. Celebrate their wins. Be kind in their disappointments. I'm sick of students being able to post something that's, I see something out there and it's just this depressing, this difficult situation they're going through, whatever, and no one's ever engaged with that post. And it's like, man, is anyone out there? Is anyone reaching? Is anyone being kind and present in their life? The quickest way to lose followers is sarcasm and cutting remarks. And so just cut that out. There's no reason for it. Things can be taken so the wrong way, right between the lines, and the things you intended can be completely misinterpreted. So just be kind. You don't want things that are out there just to be posted, and somehow later it comes down to it that you said something that really hurt a feeling, or was a sarcastic remark that you didn't mean anything by it, but can be interpreted in a different context. And just really be careful with those things, because you can really get yourself in trouble, but be beneficial in that. The third thing, and I'll kind of close with this, is not just to be present, to be kind, but to be helpful or to be useful. Find ways of not just being nice, but actually be resourceful to people. If you look through your feed and all that you ever post is things about what you had to drink that day as a coffee, if you're going to post something about coffee, then at least post like your review on it. Hey, I would recommend this one, or don't just say Sunday morning looking great. It's like, okay, cool. That's not useful to anyone but yourself in that. So if you want to actually be engaging in social media, make sure it's something that you're posting out there that actually is helpful to other people. Maybe it's a good thought and it's a leadership development, something that you're posting out there, or something that you're encouraging your students to do, a challenge that you're having them engage with, or something that is going to be just consistently beneficial to people as they follow you. You want to reward your followers, reward those who are following you and they're looking to you for help. Then offer ways that you can be useful and beneficial to them. And so that's really all I have for this moment. I know there's a lot we can get into details on it, but this is definitely a world of digital media, social media, and definitely don't just kind of be completely away from the things and cut it off completely. There's others that, just the nature of the platform itself, like I personally have a conviction. I don't have a Snapchat, and that's okay if you do. But personally, I don't find enough reason for being a benefit to me or to the ministry I do, and so I feel like there's some things that I just have to kind of weigh out in that way. So I just want to encourage you to look at the mediums as a whole. Maybe a new one coming up, 2018, and you may be the producer of it and app developer, and you make a great thing. Maybe there's others that come your way and you say, man, this is one I really want to engage with and be present with. But I want to say thank you for loving students, encouraging them, and making the most of social media.